You want to own a pharmaceutical company. Discover the drugs, patent the molecules, watch hospitals place orders they have no choice but to fulfill. The average drug that reaches a pharmacy shelf took 12 years and $2.6 billion to develop, has a 90% chance of failing somewhere in that process. And the moment its patent expires, a generic manufacturer will replicate it for 3 cents on the dollar and sell it cheaper than bottled water. And yet the companies that survive this system generate profit margins that make luxury goods look modest. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how pharmaceutical companies convert scientific uncertainty into predictable cash flows, why the patent system is the single most valuable legal instrument in modern capitalism, and why the biggest threat to a $100 billion drug company isn't a competitor, it's a calendar date. The number most people quote is $2.6 billion. That's the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development's estimate for the average fully capitalized cost of bringing a single new drug to market, including the cost of failures. That figure accounts for the 9 out of 10 drug candidates that enter clinical trials and never make it out. Break it down by phase. Preclinical research lab work, animal studies, initial safety screening runs $1 to $5 million per compound. Phase 1 clinical trials, testing safety in 20 to 100 healthy volunteers, cost $4 to $8 million. Phase 2, testing efficacy in several hundred patients, costs $13 to $20 million. Phase 3, the large-scale trials of 1,000 to 3,000 patients that actually determine whether the FDA approves the drug, runs $50 to $200 million. Then there's the FDA filing itself, manufacturing scale-up, distribution infrastructure, and a sales force. By approval day, you've spent a decade and roughly $2.6 billion on one drug. That might not work. For comparison, the entire GDP of Bhutan in 2023 was $2.9 billion. You are spending the annual economic output of a sovereign nation on a molecule that a committee in Maryland will vote on. And then there's the strange case of Martin Shkreli. In 2015, his company Turing Pharmaceuticals acquired Daraprim, a 62-year-old drug treating a parasitic infection called toxoplasmosis, for $55 million. Overnight, he raised the price from $13.50 per pill to $750. No new research. No reformulation. Just a price increase on a drug with no generic competition, protected by market exclusivity rather than a patent. Revenue from a single overlooked molecule, repriced to extract maximum value from a captive customer base. The medical establishment was outraged. The business logic was structurally sound. Shkreli went to prison, but not for the price increase. That part was legal. Here's how it operates in practice. A new drug receives patent protection at the point of filing, typically during early research, years before approval. By the time the drug reaches market, 8 to 12 years of that patent life are already consumed. The effective commercial patent window is roughly 7 to 12 years. Inside that window, the manufacturer sets the price. There are no government price controls in the United States. There is no ceiling. There is only what the market, meaning insurance companies and hospital systems, will negotiate. The industry term is pricing power. It is the most valuable economic attribute a product can possess. Humira Abvai's rheumatoid arthritis drug generated $21.2 billion in global revenue in 2022 alone. Total Humira revenue since launch, over $200 billion. One molecule. One patent portfolio. The drug's list price in the United States reached $84,000 per patient per year. In Germany, the same drug costs $20,000. Same molecule, same factory, different country, different negotiating structure. Abvai spent approximately $500 million developing Humira in the 1990s. They have collected 400 times that investment back. The patent system didn't just protect the drug. It financed one of the largest wealth transfers from healthcare systems to a single corporation in recorded history. The casual observer looks at a pharmaceutical company and sees research, labs, scientists, clinical trials. That's the public-facing story. The real architecture is patent evergreening. A drug's base patent expires after 20 years from filing. Before expiration, the manufacturer makes minor modifications, a new delivery mechanism, an extended release formulation, a slightly altered dosage, and files new patents on the modifications. Each new patent restarts the exclusivity clock on a variation of the same drug. AbbVie filed over 130 patents related to Humira across its commercial lifetime, many of them incremental. The result: biosimilar competitors were legally blocked from the U.S. market until 2023, nearly 2 decades after the original compound's development. AbbVie had 130 patents. Competitors had lawyers. AbbVie won. Then there's the pricing architecture most patients never see. The list price of a drug, the number on the invoice, is not what anyone actually pays. Pharmacy benefit managers, the intermediaries between drug companies and insurance plans, negotiate rebates. A drug might list at $500 per dose, while the manufacturer provides a 40% rebate to the PBM in exchange for preferred formulary placement. The net price is $300. The list price stays at $500 for patients without insurance, who pay the full amount. The spread between list price and net price is where the industry's negotiating complexity lives and where uninsured patients get systematically destroyed. 3 PBMs, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and OptumRx now control approximately 80% of U.S. prescription drug transactions. They are simultaneously the drug company's largest customers and their most powerful negotiating adversaries. The thing that sounds like a conspiracy is just vertical integration. Follow the rebate. They do. The pattern repeats. Pfizer's blockbuster cholesterol drug Lipitor generated $13 billion in annual revenue at its peak, the best-selling drug in pharmaceutical history. When its patent expired in 2011, generic versions entered the market within weeks. Lipitor revenue collapsed from $9.6 billion in 2011 to $3.9 billion in 2012 in a single year. Pfizer's total revenue fell $10 billion in 24 months. The company had not built sufficient late-stage pipeline to replace the income. They survived because of scale and a subsequent $68 billion acquisition of Wyeth. Smaller companies with the same single drug dependency did not survive. The lesson is structural. A pharmaceutical company is not a drug business. It is a pipeline business. The drugs are temporary. The pipeline is the asset. In 2019, Bristol-Myers Squibb acquired Celgene for $74 billion, the largest pharmaceutical acquisition in history at the time. The deal was premised on Celgene's blood cancer drug Revlimid, generating $9.8 billion annually, and a late-stage pipeline BMS believed would sustain growth. Revlimid's patent expired in 2022. Generic competition arrived. Revenue dropped sharply. Several of the pipeline drugs failed in trials. BMS spent $74 billion on a portfolio that delivered a fraction of its projected value. By 2023, BMS was cutting 2,200 jobs and divesting assets to service the acquisition debt. They paid full price for peak earnings and received declining earnings instead. Acquisition math in pharmaceuticals requires brutal discounting for patent expiry. BMS was optimistic. The calendar was not. 2 scenarios. Real numbers. A small specialty pharmaceutical company focused on a single rare disease drug with orphan drug designation can generate $200 to $800 million in annual revenue from a patient population of fewer than 10,000 people. Orphan drugs command prices of $100,000 to $500,000 per patient per year because the FDA grants 7 years of market exclusivity, and the patient population is too small for generic manufacturers to profitably enter. Net margins run 25% to 40%. Annual profit on $400 million in revenue, $100 to $160 million. Niche. Defensible. Deeply uncomfortable to explain at dinner parties, but financially coherent. A large integrated pharmaceutical company, Eli Lilly's scale, reported $34.1 billion in 2023 revenue, driven largely by its GLP-1 diabetes and obesity drugs Mounjaro and Zepbound. Net income, $5.2 billion. Market capitalization at the end of 2023, $556 billion. Lilly's obesity drug franchise alone is projected to generate $50 billion annually by 2030 if current growth rates hold. 1 therapeutic category. 1 biological mechanism. $500 billion in market value. And then there's the case that clarifies the entire industry. George Merck II built Merck into the dominant pharmaceutical force of the 20th century by investing in research infrastructure at a time when most companies bought or licensed drugs rather than discovering them. By the 1950s, Merck had developed streptomycin, cortisone, and the first measles vaccine. His philosophy was that medicine was for patients and profits would follow. They did. When he died in 1957, Merck was valued at what would be approximately $40 billion today, built almost entirely on discovered molecules and the patents protecting them. The patent is the product. Everything else is just the story you tell about it.